get started here in just a moment with our public hearings. Before we do, quick run through, if this is your first time with us, on how we'll handle the cases before us. We'll have staff present the case. I'll then invite an applicant or the representatives of the applicant forward, and they can share additional details with us about their project. Have an opportunity to ask questions of them. Then we'll open up the public hearing. So if you're here today from the public, I'll announce that and invite you forward to share your thoughts at that point. After that, we'll invite the applicant back up to address anything raised during the public hearing, and then have a discussion, make a decision before moving on to our next case. Before we get started with our first public hearing, commissioners, any potential conflicts of interest for today's meeting? No? All right. Then we can get started with our first case at 805 and 825 Leonard Street Northeast.
Our first case today is a request to operate a residential rehabilitation center and social service facility at 805 and 825 Leonard Street Northeast. The master plan has identified this property as medium-low density residential. It was formerly used by the DA Blodgett, and Hope Network was the most recent owner, but they didn't fully utilize the property. It's been vacant for a few years now. The neighboring properties, it's surrounded by low-density residential, except for the small commercial node to the south across Leonard. The property is located on the northwest side of the intersection of Leonard and Northfield. The property, the commercial node across the street is where Vitale's is. There's a laundromat there as well, a few other businesses. There are some multi-family apartments to the east and the north, and the remainder of the surrounding properties are low-density residential properties. The site is approximately 2 3/4 of an acre. And it is improved with 2 brick buildings, a larger single-story building in the middle of the property, and on the southeast side, a smaller 2-story brick building. It has, as you can see, surface parking, and around the parking areas, the perimeter has mature trees and a landscape buffer to provide screening between the parking lot and the neighboring residential properties. This property on the southwest side of the site is not part of the subject property. It is a separate parcel owned by Hope Network, and as you can see on the survey, there are some internal connections between the 2 properties. One consideration the Planning Commission may wish to discuss is whether or not it's best to keep those internal connections between the 2 properties, or if they should be closed. There is not intending to be any operational connection between the building that Hope Network owns to the west here, and that's at 775 Leonard, and the subject property today. There's an ingress off of Leonard Street, and 2 into the parking lot off of Northfield Drive. The applicant is not proposing to make any significant changes to the site. It's intended to be utilized mostly as is, just anything that needs to be, any landscaping, anything in disrepair that needs to be brought up to par will be maintained and revitalized. I'll jump ahead to some of the site improvements proposed are to add on the northwest side of the parking area to utilize some of the parking spaces and create an outdoor activity area. There is already a significant landscape buffer on the west side. I'll show some pictures of that. And there's a grade change, privacy fence, and some mature trees on the north side as well. As you can see on this map, the main entry is proposed to be on the north side of the building. And this single-story building will be utilized as the residential facilities for the program participants. The program is intended to be used as a residential rehabilitation facility for previously incarcerated individuals returning to society. The program will be fully staffed. There will be 13 full-time staff during the day and 4 staff overnight. The program is proposed to have up to 60 beds for both men and women. This slide will show how this single-story building is proposed to be used. The main entry on the north side will be utilized, and the orange shaded areas are intended to be mostly staff offices, and the resident facilities will be in the blue shaded areas. The internal program, they will have food service, community rooms, and rooms available for individual and group counseling for the residents as well. The 2-story building on the southeast side of the site is intended to be used for additional offices and some community spaces and area available to utilize for additional programming for the residents, like job training. And I will let the applicant speak more fully to the intended use of that building. Regarding the operations, there will be strict hours that the applicant also can speak to. The outside activity areas are expected to be staffed at all times and conclude by 7, and there's a lights out policy by 9 p.m. Resident arrival times will occur during the week, during normal business hours, and residential discharge times generally occur between 8 and 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. The Planning Commission may wish to explore with the applicant what the specifics for the discharge policy is. Here's some pictures of the site. As you can see in photo number 2 and number 3, that there is already a landscape buffer in place between the parking lot area and the residential properties. And in this photo number 2, you can see that there's a retaining wall, a grade change, and a 6-foot privacy fence. We have received some letters of concern from neighboring residents. One of the residents lives directly behind the property here, and it was indicated that the fence is currently in disrepair, and the Planning Commission may wish to consider a condition of approval to ask that the fence be repaired or replaced. Regarding parking, there's a significant amount of parking on the site. Currently, there are 119 parking spaces. With the addition of the outdoor recreation area, that would bring the parking to 93 available spaces, which is adequate for the use that's proposed. There are no bike facilities indicated on the plan, and the Planning Commission may wish to discuss with the applicant the need or the potential for adding a covered bike facility or an indoor bike facility for the residents' use. It's been indicated that most of the residents aren't expected to have vehicles. And if they don't have vehicles, they rely on other transportation. There is a bus stop right in front of the property on Leonard, and it's possible that they will rely on bicycles to get around as well. So in some consideration for the Planning Commission today would be the impact of this use on the neighboring properties and any concerns that are brought to your attention today. Does the Planning Commission have any questions for me?
Thanks, Laura. Commissioners, any questions at this time? All right, thank you. I'll invite the applicant up if there are other details you'd like to share with us.
Hello, I'm Scott Vinn with Integrated Architecture, and I'm joined by leadership from Cherry Health, including Bill Jewer, the COO, Dr. Avery Brown, the Director of the Correctional Health Programs at Cherry Health, and Tasha Blackman, the CEO of Cherry Health. So we've got ample ability to answer any of your questions today. I think the presentation was pretty clear, and hopefully the graphics represent the intent, which is really to use the building as it's situated today with an interior remodel to really relocate an important community asset from one part of town to a larger facility. And if there's any questions, we're here to answer anything that you have for us.
Any questions?
Sure. Could you talk about the specifics for discharge procedures?
Dr. Martin. Certainly. What do you want to know?
Go ahead.
I guess just how does it work? So what, yeah, just.
So the clients.
Would you mind stepping up to the mic, maybe stating your name for the record as well?
Yes, Avery Brown, Director
Thank you.
of Correctional Health Programs for Cherry Health. So the clients, they come in from close custody. We provide intake. We bring them in, account for their belongings. They program. Once the programming portion of their stay is complete, they're allowed to navigate to their respective homes within their respective communities on what we call home confinement. Once that portion of their stay is complete, they actually discharge back out of the system to their home. And so that span of stay is anywhere from 6 months to a year.
So, but do they typically, during normal kind of daytime hours, it's not a bunch of nighttime coming and going, it's not?
No, so programming happens from 7, 8 in the morning till normal business hours, 5, 6 in the evening. When they're arriving, sometimes mass transportation, bus, plane can be delayed, and so sometimes it's an outlier, not the norm. We may get in a resident 9 o'clock, 10, but nothing that would be too meddlesome or bothering the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And when they leave your process, they have completed all their programming and all the requirements, and they are, it's
discharged.
all. Yeah.
Done.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. And I read in the packet, it's nonviolent.
Correct.
Okay, great.
These are white-collar offenders.
Great, thank you.
Follow up to that question, are residents allowed to come and go, or are they confined to that space?
They're confined. However, all movement from the facility into the community is called furloughs. And so we have changed the nomenclature to passes, community social passes, and so they're on work release programming, family reunification, social outings with their children, obtaining of vital information to get driver's license, ID, things of that nature.
Okay, thanks.
I guess going back to one of the other questions, in terms of bicycle use, bicycle parking, is that something that y'all typically provide or see a need for? If folks don't have.
We haven't historically provided that mode of transportation, but if the resident deems that they would like to ride a bike, I'm sure we would be able to facilitate storage of those devices. But in addition to the question you asked, all residents that come into our program are monitored 24 hours, 7 days a week. At all times, we know where they are. We have a state-of-the-art global positioning system that allows us to speak with them, to know where they are, and direct them as need be.
Excellent.
All right.
Sorry.
You go.
I was curious about the choice to make the main entrance in the back of the building. I mean, typically entries are meant to be on the street or off from the main street. Could you speak to that a little bit, and that choice?
Yeah, so this is not a commercial use building, and it's not a building that anyone off the street can come into. So the building is closed to anyone but staff and residents. So there wouldn't really be a need for folks to come in off of Leonard Street. So for us, it seemed to make more sense to use the back entrance that's proximate to the parking.
Thank you.
Could you speak, I was, noticed that, I drove around there, and then, of course, it's not been used for several years. And you talked about cleaning it up. What kinds of things do you foresee, beautification activities?
So I think first and foremost, probably just the fact that they would become vitally used buildings would be an improvement for the neighborhood. You could see in the photographs that the parking lot is in need of resurfacing, so that would be part of what we would do. And then we would also update the landscaping around the building. I think it's part of the packet that we would propose to use some part of the parking to create a green space for folks so that they have a place to go on property outside of the building.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, as part of that landscaping and upgrades, would you be open to fixing that fence with the adjoining neighbor?
Yes, absolutely. Fixing or replacing, we would be open to that.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple of questions for you. In other rehabilitation facilities, the designated smoking area has been problematic because of its impact on adjacent neighbors. And I'm just wondering, to adjacent neighbors, can you describe where a designated smoking lounge might go or location on the property?
So there's some courtyard space that is actually not visible from the outside. And I think what we would look to do is make that courtyard space open to the residents. And if we were going to have designated smoking, do that there.
Okay. And would that be true for employees?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Also wondering, the property maintenance, I understand that the residents would be coming from a federal system, but the actual property would be managed and controlled by Cherry Health. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. So it's a program of Cherry Health, and we do have a contract with the Federal Bureau of Prisons that brings the residents to us. But we would be the owners and the caretakers of the building.
Okay. Both interior and exterior?
Yes.
Okay. Also, I see in a couple of the letters just concerns about potential behavior of the residents or concerns about increased crime. And I'm just wondering how in your operational plan do you believe that would address those concerns? If you could just maybe go into a little bit more detail about that.
So I think Dr. Brown talked a little bit about the fact that folks do have GPS trackers. We have programming for them. Some of them work. Most of them are going through behavioral health therapy with us as well. What I would say is our program over at 801 College has been operating in Grand Rapids probably for 40 years. I think folks could talk to the neighbors over there, and if they knew what our building was, would probably say that they haven't had any issues with the folks that are in our program. So I think it's a pretty well-managed program. I have a lot of faith in our ability to continue that in this bigger space.
And we actually did look up the calls for service record, which is obviously but one metric relative to impacts and on the college facility. And I believe it was one this year call for service and I want to say a handful, I believe, excuse me, it was maybe 5 requests for GRPD services and also maybe an equal number for medical services. So when we think about impact to city services as well as impact to the neighbors, that might provide the Planning Commission with some assurances that I don't think, at least from a planning perspective, we would consider those calls for service to be burdensome beyond what the city could manage with our GRPD services.
Related? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Kristen, maybe a question for you, but I wonder about the exception parcel that Hope is holding on to, and if feels like there should be some easement agreements, and they have parking on your land, and is that in the plan? Is that within our purview, Kristen, or is that private party actions, or just feels like there should, I'm sure the relationship is great, but you just never know how that goes, right?
Yeah, I think, we don't have a wholesale redevelopment of the property, but certainly from an operational perspective, it would seem critically important, I would think, for Cherry Health to want to have those written easement agreements in place. Certainly, we've seen good intentions with neighbors getting along and handshake agreements relative to access and circulation. Unfortunately, doesn't always pan out as time moves on. So it would certainly be our recommendation to require those formal agreements because oftentimes we're the recipients of the complaints when the relationships are not tended to. So yes, it is in your resolution to, sorry, Elizabeth. It is in your resolution for those formalized agreements to be put into place.
That's what I was going to ask.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? All right, thanks. I'll have you all take a seat. I'll open up the public hearing. If you're here today and want to speak on this case on Leonard Street, please come forward, state your name, and share your thoughts with us. I do ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, just in the interest of time.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Hampshire. I'm a Creston resident. I'm the executive director for the Creston Neighborhood Association. CNA's land use and board of directors voted to support this project. They presented to us in October and held a vote in, September, and then held our vote in October. We felt that this fell within the original use, or within the range of original use of this inactive space. And we also asked Cherry Health to be transparent in their communication with neighbors through the attendance of our annual meeting, which Bill did and spoke on this program and with our neighbors, as well as do a direct mailer to not just our neighbors, but also those in Highland Park. They did so within beyond the 2 blocks that we originally asked them. We believe that this is a evidence-based program and is a growing asset in our community. It's a crucial piece to tackling the significant issues facing our returning citizens. I mean, these are nonviolent offenders. This country has a crisis with recidivism. Any pieces that significantly reduce that and is evidence-based, we support. We did research on the college site and didn't find any significant complaints either from those neighborhoods. And also, Cherry Health is a reputable agency, and their programs have benefited our community greatly. We know they invest in their properties, and we would welcome them into Creston. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a resident that actually lives not directly behind, but the neighboring person who has the broken down fence in the backyard. I haven't prepared to talk because I didn't know I was going to talk today, but when we first received the communication, it was a couple weeks ago, and we got a postcard, and it was our first, that was the first time that we were made aware that there was plans of using this building. And when we first got the letter, it didn't indicate what the purpose was for. It just said it was Cherry Street Health. And then a week later, we got a letter explaining exactly what the plan was, which kind of, in my mind, seemed a little bit deceitful. to get an invitation to a meeting, that you think Cherry Street Health, I associate with like health facilities, not rehabilitation of prisoners. And I definitely do support that we need these types of programs. Definitely not against that, but I don't want it in my backyard. I have a young child, and there's a lot of young families. I'm a 3-minute walk away from an elementary school. You know, I have a lot of concerns about it devaluing our property. You know, my mom's lived in this neighborhood for 25 years. It's just, I'm not in support of it, and this is the first time that I was made aware of it as a resident that lives directly behind this building. So that's all I have to say, but.
My name is Julie, and I'm Sarah's mom. And we also have another issue, is there is an easement, the city easement, in between the properties. And that is ran down, not taken care of, and we kind of like want to know why that's not gonna be taken care of also. That needs to be addressed too, because we don't want people to be able to walk through, which we've had several times. People walk through the easements and tent behind our house, and that has happened. And so we realize that Cherry Street is a very nice organization, but we don't really approve of having prisoners back that are going to be rehabilitated and back in society in our backyard. And along with Vitale's being across the street, which is a bar, and we kind of want to know what kind of activity that would make between the prisoners and workforce, because they could probably just work over at Vitale's. And there's a lot of different activity that goes on over there too, so, but that's all I have to say. But I do not approve of this also.
All right, thank you. Anyone else today on this case?
I'm Dan Zarzecki, property owner immediately to the west of the back entrance. We initially saw the Cherry Health facility. I was glad to see something move into an abandoned facility. I would like to see it kept from deteriorating. But yes, I agree with the other people that were just up here. It was kind of sneaky under the ground. I got a postcard and say, hey, come and talk to us. But my biggest concern was 50 to 60 residents, and I wasn't impressed with the size of the building that it's going to support that many people. And we've got one chain link fence in between it, and D.A. Blodgett before them was, pretty quiet and serene. I anticipate a lot of extra foot traffic and people through the neighborhood. I'm not real impressed that the clientele is, it is what it is, but I'm not saying I don't want it in my neighborhood, but I just wanted to raise some concerns, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on this case? All right, I will close the public hearing. I'll invite the applicant back up if there's anything you want to address that was raised, or if the commission might have other questions.
I think we're good.
Do you know anything about an easement?
Yeah, we can definitely see, I think if you go to the site plan as well, Elizabeth, or one of the plans that was up on the, yep, there we go. We can see that there does appear to be a utility easement that runs from Leonard north, probably about a third into the property from the east, kind of bifurcates the two buildings. I don't have the easement language in front of me. I'm not sure if integrated or the applicant is better aware, but it does indicate that it's a utility easement, which typically does not also provide public access when it's labeled as a utility easement. That's something we could definitely pull the language for if we had to, but it seems unusual that it would allow for public access through that easement. Do you have more on that?
Yeah, and it's not meant to be a throughway
Yeah.
for any pedestrian movement. So if, I believe there's already a fence, whether, I don't know the condition of it, but a fence and additional screening there to prohibit people from walking through would be fine if that helped the situation. There's no intent for anybody to be walking through there, especially, that's where the trash is actually collected right now. So it's really not a pedestrian way, and if it is, it's not intended to be.
Yeah, I was going to, that was my next comment as well, is that there is some fencing, but certainly if the Planning Commission feels that additional fencing is necessary along the perimeter of the property, that's something that could be conditionally approved, that where fencing doesn't exist, fencing could be provided, or where, it's not a solid fence could be provided. That's well within the purview of the Planning Commission as well.
That, the dumpster enclosure, was that granted approval at some time, or was it just, I don't know when the facility was upgraded or installed to begin with, but it seems like it's not in a great spot relative to the neighboring residential.
So it probably wasn't that long ago. Blodgett did a pretty significant renovation and maybe an expansion. It's been within the last 10 years since I was here. There's certainly other locations on the property that the dumpster could be moved to. I don't remember the wisdom at the time for why it was put there. Typically, we try to put it in the location where it's least impactful to the neighbors, but also not visible, meaning in front of the street from the pedestrian areas. But also there's just the movement of the trucks, being able to dump the trash is also a consideration. So, it was in the backyard and with the garage in between. So, but again, that's something that, if that was a concern, that could also be a requirement to relocate the dumpster. But based on the pictures that have been provided, it looks like it's relatively new.
And other than landscaping, they're not. Sorry. And other than the getting rid of some of the blacktop and upgrading landscaping and such, they're not really renovating the building at all or doing any other exterior changes. So, I don't know. I'm not sure I would require the movement of the trash based on kind of the extent of redevelopment they're proposing here.
Yeah, relative to landscaping, we did suggest that a landscape buffer be provided between 805 and 775, which is the property that Hope will retain, because they will now be two separate entities. So we suggested that a landscape buffer could be implemented there. But that is the extent of our suggestions without having the benefit of the public hearing. So if there's more fencing or fencing repairs that the Planning Commission heard could be done, you could add that as a condition.
Other discussion on this?
I would think that the activity, bringing back activity to this site, as folks I've spoke to, will greatly enhance the feeling of safety in the neighborhood. And it sounds to me as if people will be, first of all, they have to be nonviolent. They're monitored quite closely. And it would seem to me they have every incentive to get through to this program to reenter society. And I was pleased that we got the information, both from you, Kristen, and from the applicant about their experience on College Avenue and and really not a high level of complaints or problems there. So I'm hopeful that reactivizing this is going to be a benefit overall, not only to the program occupants, but to the neighborhood as well.
That's fine.
All right. I'm happy to make a motion if we're ready. Any other discussion?
I was just a little bit on, well, maybe your lack of statement is indicative, but was there any desire for additional fencing, or are you comfortable with the existing fencing in place being adequate? And that's okay, I'm just asking the question since it came up.
I was going to add that as a condition.
Okay.
I guess we can talk about that real quick before. The fence on the northern boundary at least being repaired or replaced. The remainder of the perimeter of the property, are you open to repairing or putting in fencing that may not be there, existing?
Yes.
Sure.
So I'm Tasha Blackman, President and CEO of Cherry Health. I think one thing to mention to you all is that by design, these sites, people don't know that they're reentry spaces. They blend into the neighborhood. People that live on College have no idea what's there. They actually, some of them may think it's a health center. So when you start to add excessive fencing, it draws attention that really sends the wrong message. Anything that's in disrepair, we will definitely take care of. So I want that to be clear. Whether you all mandated it or not, it's important to us that our staff and our clients have dignity and respect, and that the community feels safe. And one of the things I can say about our Detroit program, and my colleague Dr. Brown can also attest to this, is the neighborhood is safer because of our presence there. People feel safer because of us being there. So, as you kind of think about the fencing, I just want you to also think through, what message are we trying to send in the community? Do we want there to be excessive fencing? But where there is disrepair, we will definitely take care of it. And whether that means replacing or, actually, fixing the fencing itself, we will do. We will do, no problem.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with that.
I do, if I could, I wonder if there would be, I don't know about that easement, right? Or if people are walking through in that back corner, but it would appear that, from the survey at least, that there may be about 12 feet of fence could be added that would go from the existing fence corner to the carport of the neighboring apartment, that if that's a pedestrian pathway today, that might be worth sealing off?
Yes, we would be willing to do that.
That's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. Thank you for the clarification on that. I do, I guess I treat this more as screening than anything. This is not a fence to keep people in or out necessarily. It's to screen the parking lot and just to maintain the privacy of the neighboring residents. So I think that's important. And I wouldn't suggest ever putting a fence all the way around a property like this. I think just, between the residential properties that are adjacent to the parking lot is appropriate. So, thank you.
I was going to say, I've been sitting here trying to think. I've got a friend who lives close to 801 College, and honestly, this is the first that I'm hearing about this. So I think having a huge heavy fence around the building, it would definitely stand out to me and make me think twice. So I'm glad the comments were made.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion before I head in? Okay. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission approves The special land use and site plan review request of Cherry Health, Tasha Blackman, to operate a residential rehabilitation and social service facility in the MCN LDR district at 805 and 825 Leonard Street Northeast for the following reasons. The proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the zone district, because the proposed use will help increase the number and variety of housing units to meet the diverse needs of residents, Master Plan Objective GN3, and promote the rehabilitation and reuse of buildings already existing on a site. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of Section 5.12.08.E because the existing site will be utilized with minimal changes, and all elements of the site design are harmoniously and efficiently organized in relation to topography, the size and type of the lot, character of the neighborhood and adjoining property, and the type, size, and proportions of the buildings. The proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because activity associated with the proposed use is not anticipated to impose a burden on the other uses in the area, and the proposed use will be residential in a residentially zoned area. The proposed use will not have adverse effects on the neighborhood because the use is anticipated to have less traffic than the previous use, and adequate on-site parking will be provided, and the proposed outdoor activity area will take place of unneeded surface parking and existing site conditions, including mature trees, landscaping, and privacy fence will adequately screen and buffer neighboring properties from outside activities. The proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter, because the program is largely an indoor program with a lights-out policy starting at 9 p.m. With the lights out policy starting at 9 p.m. and outdoor activities will be monitored by staff and conclude at 7 p.m. The program is residential by nature and staff will be present at all times. And most residents will not have personal vehicles and will instead rely on other means of transportation. The proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of pedestrian-oriented environment, because adequate connections to existing walkways and public sidewalks already exist, and the existing site layout and proposed use both support a pedestrian-oriented environment. The building and site area for the proposed use will retain as many natural features of the landscape as practicable because the existing mature trees and landscaping will be maintained and augmented where necessary. Adequate public or private infrastructure and services already exist, and no additional burden is expected with the establishment of this use. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability and/or economic welfare of the city because the intent of the program is to result in placement of financially stable, independent individuals that will contribute to the economic welfare of the city. The proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all applicable state laws. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. Standard conditions set A approvals on the screen, but I'll read them. That the testimony, application, and plan submitted by the applicant and signed, dated, and stamped by the planning director shall constitute the approved plans except if plan elements do not meet ordinance requirements and/or as amended in this resolution. That the use shall operate according to the application and per testimony as recorded in the Planning Commission minutes. That this approval does not include any proposed signs and any future signs that shall be subject to the requirements of Article 15 of the ordinance and permits received prior to installation. That a land use development services, LUDS permit, building permit, and all other required permits be obtained from the city of Grand Rapids prior to construction, demolition, or operation. That any expansion of the approved special land use requires an additional special land use review and approval by the Planning Commission. That the proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all state laws. And that this approval shall take effect 16 calendar days from the date of the Planning Commission's decision. That the use shall accommodate no more than 60 residents at any one time. That indoor or covered bike facilities shall be provided for the residents' use.
Do you want me to chime in?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know what we came to, what conclusion we came to on this.
3 for your consideration, that a formal easement agreement be executed to address the internal connection to 775 Leonard Street Northeast and a landscape buffer between the properties be provided in accordance with the requirements of Section 51112 of the zoning ordinance.
Great.
And
Five, yeah.
five, that the fence along the north lot line be repaired and replaced where necessary. The fence shall be extended to the east lot line to the extent permitted by the easement.
Thank you.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any final discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Our next case is Front and Scribner rezoning. I won't name off all the addresses. Are you presenting this? All right.
All right. Did I go the other way?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. We did have a case on our agenda originally that's been withdrawn. That was on Benjamin. So if you were here for that, I apologize. Doesn't look like anyone's jumping up and leaving, though.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, okay. Oh, okay. All right, so the next case before you is being brought to you by yours truly, the Planning Department. We are recommending that the Planning Commission consider the rezoning of the subject properties listed in your packet from the Transitional City Center Zone District, the TCC Zone District, to the Traditional Neighborhood City Center, the CC Zone District. Highlighted on the screen are the properties that I've mentioned, and again, those were noticed accordingly, and actual individual postcards to the owners and occupants were also sent. The extent, for the record, the extent of the request extends from 6th Street to the south, Leonard Street to the north, and then the river to the east and the highway to the west. That was a geographic challenge there. All right. And so you can see the aerial photography shows the nature of the location and the buildings, the patterns of development, and I'm certain all of you have visited the site because we've had a couple of cases in the past there. So over the past several years, the west side of Grand Rapids has experienced some significant changes as a result of the projects, the growth of the neighborhood business districts, both on Leonard Street, and also we've seen some significant changes on Bridge Street to the south. As a result, we believe, based on those development trends, the needs of the existing businesses and the desperate need for housing by the city, we think that it is a good time to talk about the possibility of rezoning this location of the city to the City Center Zone District. So when I mention known development trends that we've seen, last summer, the Planning Department met with some developers that were interested in redeveloping 260 and 282 Leonard Street, which are the properties adjacent the river just south of Leonard on the east side of Front Street. They were interested in developing a multi-story building and providing access to and along the Grand River. So in general, the development was achieved a lot of the goals that the city has outlined. Unfortunately, the proposed development did not align with the current zoning requirements in that it greatly exceeded the height of the zone district. I'll also note that in the past, riverfront properties have also been especially challenging because of the infrastructure with the flood wall and the depths of the parcels. So we've seen a lot of challenges associated with getting good redevelopment locations on those properties that they're pretty well constrained. So anyway, the development that was presented to us, as I said, did appear to meet a lot of the goals relative to riverfront access, beautifying the riverfront, and providing housing. So it sort of gave us pause because the development seemed to align with a lot of the other goals, But we thought rather than taking this one-off approach of bringing this forward for your consideration as a PRD, for example, we thought maybe it made sense to think a little bit more holistically. Now, I understand that we are also embarking upon a master plan, probably 2/3 of the way through that process. But we also know that the master plan has a very intentional engagement process to be as inclusive as possible, and the scope of it is not small. Therefore, it's going to take time. I don't anticipate that that plan will be adopted by the city until next summer. And then, of course, there's an implementation time that's going to be needed, which will probably take about a year. So even though we are running a concurrent planning process, it's not something that's going to be done quickly. And with the needs of the city, the goals of the city, it seemed like this was a relatively simple carve-out, if you will, for us to consider separately or outside of that master planning process. So within your staff report, I've well, actually, Elizabeth, I shouldn't say I, but we've provided you with quite a bit of information relative or comparing the existing zoning district to the proposed zoning district so that you can see how or what is the most significant change between the districts. I would say that from a use perspective, the zone districts are pretty similar or very similar. From a site layout and building placement standard, they are also very similar. I think that the most significant differences that are important for your consideration are both relative to building height, I'll go into that in a little bit, as well as parking. So as you know, the Transitional City Center Zone District currently has parking requirements that are based on the proposed use or the existing use, whereas in the City Center Zone District, there are no parking requirements. I can also tell you that city staff, economic development, engineering, mobile GR have all met, as well as I've had conversations with DGRI or the DDA about this because it is within their boundaries as well, the DDA boundaries, I should say. And we believe that rezoning this property, or that I should say back up, that the infrastructure is in place to consider the rezoning to a more intense zone district. So it is clearly constrained in terms of its geographic location. I come in off Leonard every day to go to work, so I'm very familiar with what that Front Street or Scribner intersections are like. They are busy, but we do not believe that the demand that would result from the redevelopment would be beyond what the street segments could carry. And then obviously 6th Street to the south, not as busy, but geographically constrained as well. So we sort of went through that exercise to determine whether it was even appropriate just from a city services perspective. Equally important was that since we were pulling this process forward outside of the community master plan, similar to what we did during a rezone consideration on Bridge Street. I did host a meeting at the Development Center and invited all of the occupants and property owners to come to the meeting to discuss this outside of this formal public hearing process. We also made ourselves available, or made myself available, to meet with individuals who maybe either couldn't attend the meeting that I held because of their schedules, or that had additional follow-up questions and wanted to really hone in on their particular use or how this rezone would affect their particular property and their plans. So we did run through that exercise. West Grand Neighborhood Association, and that was also able to attend. I think I would categorize the meeting as positive. Based on what we know of the uses that are there today, none of the businesses become non-conforming, which is obviously maybe the scariest aspect, right? When we consider rezoning is to become non-conforming. I would say that perhaps the most significant impact to the existing businesses is relative to potential expansion plans, because the use might go from a permitted to a special land use. There could be some limits on the expansion of a portion or all of their business that would then necessitate a planning commission consideration because of the change in the uses and the approval process. I think that also Another important element was the parking, the amount, or maybe more specifically, the traffic. The significant potential for increased density, thus increased traffic, I think was also part of the consideration. But I did note that, the city made the change to specific to parking, the city made that change to not require parking in the city center zone district. I think it was 2018 when we implemented that. And as you may know, not a single development has gone in without providing parking. And so I really look at this as more of the city taking the hands-off approach and putting it on the business owners or the market to determine what's necessary or what's appropriate. So those businesses have current parking. They wouldn't lose that, meaning that they could continue to use that as parking even though the parking requirement is no longer in place. But yes, it is potential that increased traffic could occur as we see redevelopment happen, especially if we see redevelopment going from the single-story warehouse-type use to a multi-story residential building. So that's definitely an element for your consideration. Again, that was evaluated by Mobile GR and not felt to be something that the current infrastructure couldn't handle. I'm going the wrong way. So here on your screen shows you the existing boundaries of the transitional city center. Those are highlighted in pink, and you'll know that that generally is the donut to the downtown, which is the city center zone district that's highlighted in the pink. The City Center Zone District has 3 height categories. The DH1, the darkest pink on your screen, is our unlimited height zone district, so you can build as tall as you wish to build. The DH2, which is the height overlay that we would propose be part of this rezone. I'll flip to the next screen in a moment, has a height limit that varies. And then the DH2B, which is on the west side, that was really specific, that further reduces the height allowance in the city center to provide a better transition into the neighborhood as we get across Seward, because at that time, recall, we were expanding the city center zone district. So going back to the specific heights, I think the table is most helpful. This should look somewhat familiar because you did just approve or recommend approval, and it was adopted this summer, height amendments for the downtown. And to summarize, we didn't necessarily increase the height limits of the zone district as much as eliminating the bonus structure to make it easier to build taller. So again, going back to the DH2, which is the overlay that we are proposing, it's a little bit tricky, so bear with the geography here. On the west side of Front, so the parcels between Scribner and Front, those would be a height limit of 20 stories. Today, under the transitional city center, the height limit is 5 stories. So that is significant. Of course, you have the highway adjacent, so that's important context. But that would be permitted to go to 20 stories on that side of the, not that side, the west side of Front between Scribner and Front. On the east side of Front, so the properties that are sandwiched between Front Street and the river, the maximum permitted height, because they're within the Grand River overlay, is 10 stories as the base height, so 10-story maximum. But if they were to achieve the bonuses, and I'll describe those in a moment, then you could build to 20 stories. With the amendment this past summer for the height, and I'm sorry this is so complicated, but I want to make sure it's well understood because it's critical. With the change that you made this summer, again, we streamlined the bonuses. So the bonuses that for those properties that are sandwiched between Front and the river, in order to get beyond 10 stories, the height, there is an incentive that the property owner would need to provide us with riverfront access. So an easement that provides access along the riverfront. I think the most recent development on Front Street provided that, and you can see that development pattern in this general location. So effectively, that's a much heavier weighted bonus. So all of our eggs are in that proverbial basket, right, is to provide that access. That would get them to 9 stories if that access is provided. In order to get to 20 stories, we continue to incentivize public art. So if you provide public art and riverfront easement, those properties that I've described could build to 20 stories. Under the current ordinance, with the amendments made this past summer, the bonus structure would only allow those same properties to build to 7. Okay, so it's a bit complicated with the geography, but hopefully this table outlines that. So going back to that development that I've mentioned that was on the very northern end of Leonard Street, and I know the owner and development group is here today, under today's ordinance, they could build to 7 stories with the bonuses being, or the incentives being achieved. Under the proposed ordinance, they could then build to 20 stories with the incentives being achieved. So any questions on the height? Because I do believe height and probably parking are the most significant changes associated with this rezone. Seeing nodding heads?
Clarify?
Yes.
I had noted that if they provide riverfront access on the easement, that would get them to 9 stories.
An additional 9 stories for 219 stories. Sorry if I didn't state that clearly.
And then the public art piece.
Is worth a bonus of 1 story, which would get the total height allowance up to 20 stories. Okay. I think the subsequent slides are just a little bit of background for us in case we needed more detail on the Grand River overlay, or if you wanted to go through the use table that was also included in your packet.
You just go in particular, talk through self-storage and light industrial, the difference between the 2 zones.
Yes. But I have to look at it first. Okay, I'm sorry, self-storage and light industrial, thank you. So up here on the screen, you can see the darker green column on the left is the city center use table requirements, use district requirements. The lighter green on the right side that I'm pointing to is the transitional city center. So you can see assembly, manufacturing, production is the same, meaning it's currently a special land use and it would remain a special land use. So effectively, that would not impact the business, an existing assembly light manufacturing at all. Which way to go? Okay, so you can see that they're fairly consistent as I move south. Cannabis uses would be different in terms of in the transitional city center, their special land uses not permitted in the city center zone district. The city center zone district is more restrictive on what I would classify as our heavy industrial uses. So the material recovery and recycling, currently a special land use, and under the proposed city center zone district would not be permitted. We do not have any of those uses that are existing, and I would, from a planning perspective, find it difficult to believe that the special land use requirements could be achieved, but here nor there, it's still a difference there. Self-storage facilities would be currently permitted as a special land use. In the city center zone district, they are not permitted. I don't believe that we have any self-storage facilities, but that would be a further restriction on property redevelopment. And warehousing and storage is another one. I know quite a few of the existing businesses do have a warehouse storage aspect of their business. In many cases, it's an ancillary use, meaning that's not the primary use, they're manufacturing, but they do have some warehousing. But where we may have warehousing storage as a primary use,
that would become a non-conforming use. Truthfully, I'm not aware that we have a warehouse as a primary use of property in this location. But that could be a potential impact of that rezoning classification. We did try really hard to identify the existing uses. We've involved economic development. And again, we did hold that meeting for the property owners because that was obviously a critical piece, is to understand who was there, what they were doing, and how this could potentially impact them. To my knowledge, may change today, but to my knowledge, property owners and occupants seem generally supportive, or at least didn't find this proposed change to be a significant impediment to their current operations or future plans for redevelopment or future expansion plans. We might learn more today, of course, through this public hearing process. Any questions on uses? Right, I believe that is all I had. Certainly, if I've missed anything or if we need some additional clarification, you can let me know.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Kristen at this time?
Are there other restrictions when you develop along the waterfront that are extraordinary because of the infrastructure there that you know of?
I can't think of anything. The site placement and building layout standards are very similar between the TCC and the CC zone district. The Grand River overlay, in some cases, defaults to the zone district. In other cases, applies a very consistent setback requirement example. So it's indifferent to the underlying zoning and has a setback for all properties on the Grand River. So I'm hard pressed to think of a significant difference between them. Elizabeth, do you have anything, or Laura? No? Okay.
All right. Well, then I will open up the public hearing. If you're here today about the proposed rezoning, please come forward, state your name, and share your brief thoughts with us.
Hello, my name is Ryan Schmidt. I'm a partner at Indigo Design and Development. We are the development group that was referenced in relation to the 260 and 282 Leonard site on behalf of the owner, Joe Elias, who is also here today. We're just very excited to get to this point. It is something that we've been working on for quite some time in re-envisioning this property and finding out what we felt would be the best way to respond to the housing needs in our community, but also to activate the river in a really meaningful and attractive way. So this path, which is true what Ms. Turkelson said, we came forward with a PRD request. It was going to propose a 10-story building, which was beyond what would be allowed, even with the changes that were made previously. So we stepped back. We're participating in this process, but our hope is to build something that's taller than 10 stories here on the site of 260 and 282. But what is wonderful about this particular rezoning is that it allows for that activated and lively riverfront activation, but it also allows us to add density while preserving nearby neighborhoods. Because of the man-made barrier, 131, and the natural barrier, the river, this is an isolated area. It won't have a direct impact to any existing neighbors, which is why our meetings with the West Grand Neighborhood Association went very positively. I know they have indicated support. I don't know that a letter is in your packet, so I don't want to speak for them, but our conversations with them have been very positive about this because it would limit impact into the residential neighborhood while still allowing our city to grow and develop, and also to increase the activation, like I said before, on the riverfront. This area is also unique. I just wanted to mention because it does sit within the DDA boundary. So it is part of the Downtown Development Authority currently, although it is a transitional city center zoning. It is served both by the rapid bus service, and it also is now served by the Dash shuttle, which is wonderful. So it allows for the mobility needs to be met for, say, housing units in this location by transportation services. In addition, as was mentioned, parking it would become the developer risk, and we would have investors and lenders and others that would be expecting that. So I just wanted to state my support of this rezoning. We appreciate you considering this request. We think it's really exciting for the continued growth of Grand Rapids. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this case?
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Hendricks. I am the property owner just to the south of 260 and 282 Leonard. I own the buildings at 1150 Front and 1118. I also operate a business out of 1150. We've been on Front Street since 1994 and in that particular location since 1998. I kind of became aware of this as this development came through, and these guys were looking to go up higher. And overall, I was very in support of their plans, what they were looking at, and everything like that. What I wasn't really liking was the idea of a PRD and handling this on like a case-by-case zoning type of thing. We're gonna like piecemeal in buildings based on, oh, we want a higher thing for residential, but then this person, and it's like, okay, why don't we look at a more holistic approach? And I think that that's exactly what we're doing here, and I'm fully in support of it. I think it makes a ton of sense. I also, as somebody that owns a property in the Grand River Overlay District, in the TCC, the bonus of going up one or two more stories, if I were to ever like do something different there, isn't as appealing as what they have. And I think that it's going to really help along there to activate that riverfront. It's going to be, we need some of those stronger bonuses to get those people to give that that easement that we're talking about, right? So I think that makes a ton of sense. And overall, it's the direction of the neighborhood. Planning did a great job on having a meeting first, and everybody came together, and it was very positive. So I appreciate the consideration on this, and I think it is the right direction. And given the boundaries that they were talking about, it doesn't seem to have a lot of downside. We're not, we have the highway to the left and the river on the right, and those boundaries, the height requirement isn't going to really change much. And then really, in my last couple seconds, the things that we're concerned about was traffic, parking, and height. I think we addressed, height. And on the parking side, once again, I haven't seen any developments over on the other side of the river that have gone in without parking, even though some of them have been able to not to. Quite frankly, the plans that they presented had, the reason they had to go to 10 stories was because we had to have the parking in there, and even then that would need to be in there for some of these residential places. They're not building these without it. So, and then the traffic, honestly, they've just done a reconfiguration over there. I drive it every day. I'm in there, and we get along just fine. At 5 o'clock, it's a little rough, but to be honest, some of the uses that we're seeing changing is going to spread out maybe when the traffic is being used in that time. So I think it can handle it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on this case? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any questions or discussion at this time?
I have one question. I just want to make sure that regardless of there being no parking minimums, there are still parking maximums that are applied here, yes?
Yes, there are still parking maximums for the city center zone district.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, in the Grand River Overlay District, it says under uses, all uses in the TNCC are allowed in the overlay district. Does that trump the use table otherwise? 5.8.03C.
Need to catch up with you, I'm sorry.
I think that I don't think it trumps. This is the overlay district, not specifically as it would relate to the change to a CC, right? Because this is specific to the amendments that were made in 2018, not what's being proposed now. So it's just stating that the overlay doesn't prohibit the uses that would otherwise be allowed in this. It's more form. Right?
That's an excellent question. Elizabeth, do you remember that section?
I'm afraid I don't.
So that would need to be amended potentially.
Right, we wouldn't want, we'd want the underlying zoning to carry through the use table.
For the,
What page are you?
I can't think of that section and its reference. I agree with what you're saying, that it seems to imply that along that section, only the CC controls. But I don't remember I'm not sure right now. My head's spinning, trying to think of like what to suggest or do.
Are you recommending a text amendment here too? Do we need to notice that?
Yes, we would probably need to renotice that because this section was not,
And it is specific to this rezoning, but I think maybe more importantly, it conflicts with what exists currently, because there are sections of CC that are in the overlay district, and this would already contradict that.
yep. I'm not sure how to reconcile that in this moment.
It's possible there's an old version of the ordinance on here. It's 2019.
No, I can see it too. I'm on Unicode, so I'm seeing the current one. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure because most of our overlay, except through the downtown, is TCC, so,
Yeah, I'm thinking sort of like south of downtown and how, it would have come into play there as well.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, that's also another area of, industrial or former industrial uses. So that's maybe why we cut it in there.
maybe. I guess my suggestion right now is if you're comfortable, understanding that there could be limitations on uses on the east side of Front with this provision, we could either table a decision and come back, or we could move forward with the rezoning and then give staff a little bit of time to reconcile the discrepancy or the impact of that and make a recommendation as to whether or not it needs a code amendment, or if we can provide better articulation as to what it means for these properties and make a decision as to what you'd like to do.
City attorney might want to have a say in it, but, I'm comfortable moving forward with this. I think you stated that city commission wouldn't consider this until February, or was the hope that it
No,
would be in January?
I don't think I said that.
I thought in the lunch meeting, maybe you had mentioned when the timing of this, that was
That's
the
the next
housing.
one.
That was the housing,
one.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there might be time for that to go at the same time.
Yeah, we could just even, if you'd like, it's up to you. We could always renotice this. I guess I need time to process because I don't fully understand what the impact would be. So I could either bring it back on the January 11th meeting or the January 25th meeting, or we could move forward with what we have and then bring back or communicate via email what the implications could be and make a decision as to whether or not we want a text amendment or if we're comfortable with the implications.
Could you just repeat it one more time, what the language says?
Elizabeth, can we pull up Municode on the screen?
Yeah.
I can't seem to get out of the presentation from here, I'm sorry. In the Grand River overlay section, there's a purpose statement, an applicability, and then a uses section. And it says, all uses in the TN Transitional City Center Zone District are allowed in the Grand River Overlay District.
That's pretty clear.
So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
yeah, the concern that you would be able to have a TCC use that was now allowed to have
Right.
20 stories or 19 stories if they gave public access to the river.
Right.
Would it be easier to explain if we tabled it and then came back with one whole new thing? I mean, what's easiest or more?
I mean, it almost feels like two separate issues, right? Like,
How so?
I mean, the rezoning request, and then, like, it seems like regardless, we need to address what we've just brought up in the zoning ordinance, but does that, like, how?
Can we adopt it pending further investigation of the blah, blah, blah?
I don't think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Whatever we do before we do it, can we just, in plain English, say what's happening here?
Yeah, so I apologize, I didn't catch this. Thank you, Paul, I think. No, thank you for bringing it up. Yes, yeah, no, I think it's a great catch. So in the Grand River overlay, so in the locations that are in blue in your map, so largely encompasses the properties along the riverfront. Elizabeth's just flipping to that, too.
Which one should I go to?
Yeah, you can see that the parcels along the riverfront are within a Grand River overlay. And for the most part, it regulates how land is developed adjacent the river. Apparently, there is a section also in this section that talks about the uses that are permitted in the overlay, that the overlay also allows transitional city center uses. And the concern, it's currently city center zone district, but the concern is that if rezoned, the height gets significant and we'd be allowing 20-story buildings and the potential could be a 20-story self-storage at that point.
Yeah.
Right? I think that would be a concern.
I think more concerning is that it conflicts with what currently exists, not just this case, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, does the overlay, which talks more about form, and it doesn't really talk about use, trump the underlying zoning, which is concerned with use?
It seems to, based on the language that we just read, right? It's pretty all-encompassing.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a conflict. I'm a bit embarrassed that we didn't catch it, but also uncomfortable trying to rationalize all of its potential impacts here. So perhaps it is better, if you're comfortable, is to table it and have us come back, and if we have to renotice it, we can, or we can move forward with this and then have a cleanup item on the heels of it relative to the use allowances.
So I think that the Grand River Overlay District needs some attention, maybe. We just figured that out. But I think we're also saying that this issue exists along the length of the Grand River Overlay District currently. And so there is TNCC zone district that already has that opportunity, and we're not seeing those things that we're concerned about and haven't seen them since the Grand River Overlay District has been put in place. So I think that the overall benefits of moving to the TNCC zone district in this area are worth discussing outside of the overlay district issue. Like, I think that that definitely should be looked at. But I don't know that I don't know that we should be tabling this because of that.
Yeah, that's my question too. Like, can we still make a recommendation today? I mean,
I think
even with the self-storage example, that is still a special land use in TCC. So like,
Yes.
there can't be a 20-story self-storage go up in tomorrow.
Do you want time to think about how we should proceed?
That might be a good idea.
Like if,
could use-
take a few minute break?
Yeah. Maybe Elizabeth, Laura, Mike, and I can huddle for a few minutes and get our heads wrapped around it.
Is there a procedure to stop mid-hearing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Mike?
You can set a time that we can come back.
We're going to
All right,
recess
well,
for
Or make a motion to
15
come
minutes.
back.
Okay. Reconvene in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that works.
2:34. I just picked a time. Yeah. I wasn't trying to. Yeah, I know. Good luck. I hope you can figure it out. reconvene here, and do you have an update for us?
We have an update. So the collective wisdom, in looking at the ordinance and how it's crafted, we do believe that based on what we believe the history is of the Grand River overlay and the types of zone districts that are particularly further to the south, is to give those waterfront properties that are zoned maybe industrial, for example, a little bit more flexibility in the types of uses that we may traditionally would prefer to see along the river without having non-conforming uses come into play. So also looking at the language, it does appear that the use table of the city center TCC zone district would supplement the underlying zone district, meaning that in this particular case, it would be the city center use table in addition to, these are my pages, in addition to the TCC zone district. So I think that the impact to this particular decision is relatively inconsequential. I think it's definitely worth us going back as staff to understand whether this is a remnant regulation that we still think is appropriate. But for this particular decision, I think it's relatively inconsequential in that the TCC use table would still be in place for those waterfront properties or the properties that are in the Grand River overlay. There might be the exception. We mentioned the self-storage, the warehousing that are not permitted in the city center zone district, but are still permitted as special land uses in the TCC. So maybe those uses that we might not wish to see continue would continue at least in the short term, but they'd be under your authority in terms of whether or not it's an appropriate land use to proceed with. So I think for this particular decision, as I said, our collective wisdom is that it's relatively inconsequential. I think it's appropriate for you to continue to make a recommendation to the City Commission if you're comfortable. Staff will continue to talk about this and determine whether we think a more immediate recommendation or text amendment is necessary to move forward with, just out of the benefit of the Grand River overlay holistically, not just this decision specifically, and either follow up with an amendment, or we can always we have control over the timing of when this recommendation would be put forward to the City Commission. So if after more time and research we determine that the text amendment is probably in our best interest, we would bring that text amendment to you and then package those amendments up before we place it on the City Commission agenda.
Sounds good to
All right,
me.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, then, I guess I'll just say that I think this rezoning makes sense. It aligns largely with what we're seeing on the other side of the river too, as far as how far north the city center zone district goes. And I'm glad to know that no existing businesses would be non-conforming with this decision, so we're not negatively impacting the folks that are there, but just allowing for more opportunity in the future. Yeah, as the gentleman said, related to traffic, the city recently put in a four-way stop at 6th and Front, which is right where I work and drive through every day, and that has definitely helped with people being able to cross 6th. And so, yeah, I agree that that this stretch can handle any additional traffic, and hopefully we'll get more kind of non-single occupancy vehicle use too, with the good transit and active transportation facilities we have. So I'm in complete support and would love to hear other discussion, or I'm happy to make a motion.
I am also in support, and I want to just say I like the way that Kristen and her staff handled this and taking a step back and looking for neighborhood input, coming to a conclusion, and putting in some incentives that will help developers make the kind of investments that they need with the height. I like the incentives. I think this was a good move to look at it as a district, and as the gentleman said, not one PDR after another, it just makes sense of what we see happening, and we're helping it move in that direction. So thank you.
Ready? Anyone else? Okay. Therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request of the Planning Department of the City of Grand Rapids to rezone 748, 750, 830, 936, 942, 954, 1010, 1060, 1116, and 1155 Front Avenue Northwest, and 260 and 282 Leonard Street Northwest, and 800, 832, 902, 934, 960, 1000, 1014, 1030, 1044, and 1058 Scribner Avenue Northwest from TNTCC Traditional Neighborhood Transitional City Center to TNCC Traditional Neighborhood City Center Zone District for the following reasons. The proposed zone district will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including the future land use map, because the 2002 master plan future land use map designates these properties as mixed use near downtown. The rezoning will support the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, including allowing for advanced innovation and new residential development and redevelopment that meets the demand for housing with a greater variety in the type and design of dwellings, and to provide for a range of incomes for their residents, providing reasonable accommodation for growth and development, and promoting alternate means of transportation to the automobile, such as pedestrian, bicycle, and public transit use. The proposed zone district will further the themes and objectives of the master plan, as well as any relevant adopted area-specific plans, because the proposed TNCC zone district will provide incentives and adequate flexibility to capitalize on the Grand River as an asset for economic development and quality of life. The rezoning will support goals of the GR Forward Plan to create a connected and equitable river corridor by encouraging access to the river and to allow for greater densities downtown while protecting nearby neighborhoods. The properties to be rezoned can reasonably accommodate the requirements of the proposed zone district because the site layout and building elements of the CC zone district are substantially similar to the existing TCC zone district. The proposed zone district is compatible with the existing zone districts in the neighborhood because the existing built environment, including the expressway, provides a natural separation from nearby residential neighborhoods. The boundary of the Downtown Development Authority has already been expanded to include the portion of this area along the riverfront. Both the existing and proposed zone districts are in the traditional neighborhood classification. The proposed zone district or neighborhood classification will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the proposed zone change may encourage fuller utilization of the subject properties, as well as protect the character and quality of nearby established residential neighborhoods. The proposed zone district is consistent with the trend of development in the neighborhood because there has been interest from the development community in providing higher density housing with access to the river in this area. The rezoning the properties as proposed would not negatively impact the condition of any nearby parcels currently zoned mixed-use commercial, especially considering vacancy rates, current per square foot lease or sales rates, and other impacts, because the rezoning of properties will encourage other investment in the district. That's it.
Second. Support.
All right, we have a motion and support. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. I'll open up public comment. If you're here today to speak on anything, you can come forward and state your name and share your thoughts. Seeing no one jump up, I'll close public comment. Any other business? All right.
Should we congratulate, or should we? I want to thank our chairperson, Kyle, for his many years of service on this board. You've been a great leader, and I appreciate all you've done. And we said, see you leave this chair, but glad you'll be stuck around this table for a while longer, I hope.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Not necessary.
Words of wisdom?
No words of wisdom. None. I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. I'm excited for a few more meetings, not being the chair, and we'll see how long that lasts. Yeah, I'm happy to make every one. I'll do it. Yeah. Oh, good. That's fine. It doesn't need it. This is, hopefully the tape didn't pick it up. All right. Well, thank you. It's been great. All right, we're adjourned.
Happy holidays.